This is part two of which cultures do I feel safest around, and I had just thought of some stuff that I didn't tie into because you go down this analytical thing. I do because I'm trying to be honest, and I do think it's good to talk about. Uh, you have to teach people. You have to need to talk about these subjects, and because it is really not fair to steal from people. It's really not fair to hurt people. It's not fair to do those things. Those are things that really harm people. And all we've ever been taught in our society is don't do drugs. And then you have the side of society that knows, you got the side of society that knows nothing about drugs and medicine, and you got the side that has experience with that, right? And so cartels and dealers and all them, they know, okay, it's kind of, if somebody gets a natural medicine, it's not that dangerous, and they know that from a realistic standpoint, so they don't buy all the hypochondria that's taught to the drug-free world. They think they're stupid, and they think it's just a racist law and all that stuff. And it was set up to be a racist setup by the Democrat Party way back when, the KKK, and then pushed for prohibition between 1910 and 1920. That's from my studies. That's the best recollection I have, and I confirmed. I've studied that over and over, and so you can see the trend too. But so they're still playing games when they make somebody pay $300 to $500 for a marijuana license, and that they know most people are going to go keep getting it from the streets. So that's a trick. So nobody has a real study on that. They haven't taught you to drink tea instead of smoke it, or eat it, drink it as a tea. Put 2 leaves in the safest form of using any natural plant medicine that God created as an herb is to drink it as a tea. They promote marijuana, which is a downer. Is, you know what? An upper is an example of an upper is caffeine, coffee beans, teas, caffeinated teas. Those, in a sense, are safer than the downers as far as keeping your alertness goes. But so marijuana is not the miracle drug. I've seen marijuana smokers act like it's crazy when I've promoted the coca leaf. So you got these cultures are affected by these things. And the thing I was going to talk about, I think I've already forgotten. Okay, I remember the Democrat side of culture. So, because I had been talking about, let me finish that point and I'll go back to this. But I've seen marijuana smokers who seem to be I don't know how deep they are with cartels or top gangs or whatever, or dealing groups, how high up they are in that. But I've seen some that I would think might be up into that, and they promote marijuana and act like other drugs are bad and people who do those are bad. And then I say, well, they should legalize the coca leaf. Who are you going to try that on? Who would you risk trying that on? I'm sitting there thinking, a crack smoker. The coca leaf tea would be way safer than them still continuing to smoke crack. And not just for smoking it, but for getting hit over the head over it. For getting hit over the head for money. The dealing groups want to steal from you. The smoker dealers, a lot of the smoker dealers, are there to steal from people. And so there's not a big risk to try a coca leaf tea and see if that helps them get off the dangerous stuff and away from the gangs. So I think it should be legal for people who are pre-exposed. But so that person, what did they know? Are they just caught up into the bigotry? Somebody who would say that I've seen a person that have said that before, and I'm not naming any people, but in particular, I know people all around everywhere, but I'm just using this as an example. I've seen that same person go for days, apparently smoking marijuana, won't look up, won't say hi. It's like they don't know you anymore. It's like they don't know me or anything. They don't even know me. And they're smoking marijuana, supposedly, apparently, or just doing it too regular. So it's a downer. It's maybe they're paranoid at that point, or don't want people to realize they're doing it. I don't know what it is, but I've seen them go for days, even weeks, and not speak to anybody doing marijuana. And then they're acting like, the funny thing is, though, with some of those uppers, caffeine, you go up and then you go back down. Doesn't keep you that long, technically. And so coca leaf is an upper. That's not a promotion. I want to get everybody on drugs. That's not my goal. My goal is to get everybody off drugs. And that doesn't need to be on them, that doesn't want to be on them, all right, to help them stay off, or at least not have many relapses if they relapse. Like I do that with caffeine. My goal is to stay off caffeine as much as I can, but every now and then I relapse on it. To me, it's not a huge sin to do that. And it's not necessary, I guess somebody could call it a sin if I lacked self-control and it was my goal to stay off. They could call that a sin because I lacked self-control. Okay, well, but the goal is to stay off it mainly to stay healthy. So the more I'm off it, the healthier I'll be. Even if I relapse on caffeine, then at least and then I realize I don't like the side effects and I get back off it. And I already knew I only wanted to use it just because I hadn't done it in a while. That's not as bad as doing it every day for your body. It's not as bad for your mind and body to do it, but it is to do it every day. But I know people who would, what I would call religious nuts, who have distorted the Bible, who would act like I'm going to hell because I used coffee. I've seen some that extreme. And a lot of those are not from America. I've seen some from the Hispanic culture that are like that, actually. And they're maybe Catholic-oriented. So there's different types, and Catholics aren't, your average Catholics sector is not the most critical about people who have an addiction problem of any sort. They're not the most critical about that. But then there are some who are. I'm thinking, wait a minute, is this guy Islamic or what? So usually, sometimes I've seen Islamic people who are like that. And then I'm not sure about the higher up Islamic people, if they're the real Arabs, but sometimes when I've seen a Hispanic Islamic person or a black Islamic person, I've seen them be super judgmental about drugs and things. Then I've also seen some that are not, because they do dealing and stuff, but they can switch and play hypocrite and pick on an addict, or they can be cool with an addict. But in front of a certain crowd, they can pick on an addict and be the ones that want to help kill an addict or something. So I've seen all that kind of stuff. But so what culture though? The culture I didn't mention is the Democrat culture. It is, if you're out in the streets, and homeless venues and stuff like that, you're not allowed to talk or support. How can you be a poor person and be out here if they find out you would have any inclination to be defend that people shouldn't be violent against police, for instance? You're in danger once you do that in most places, and that's because they're the Democrat. They're like, you can't be amongst here, you can't be out here, you can't be using our homeless venues or food venues or anything else and be a conservative and all that. And they'll start putting a kind of a hit on you, or try to, and they'll. But there's a lot of cultures that once they start demonizing Trump, or if they start demonizing George Bush, that a lot of the black gangs, particularly Islamic-leaning black gangs, not, especially those. And the funny thing is, a lot of Islamic people now, they like President Trump better than the Democrat Party, because he makes a lot more sense, right? Financially, and by putting violent people out. Cracking down on violent people, cracking down on thieves, cracking down on illegals, terrorists, we'll say, terrorists particularly. And so, and gangs, and cracking down on fentanyl. It all makes sense. But yes, it is. Usually it's, if it's black folks. Okay, I've had interruptions, but I can summarize some things here. And that's the fact that I just realized, I'm going through analysis of different effects. That could take forever, because I'm considerate of all the reasons why people don't treat other people right in certain cultures or certain areas. And because sometimes it's concerted, it's a planned thing. Like if it's gangs and drug dealing gangs and all this stuff, they have a plan to treat people bad. It's not just their somebody loses their temper. Anybody can lose their temper. I've lost my temper before and had to do what I can to control it and make sure, okay, I'm not about to act up and do something wrong. I've had to do that with a temper, but my practice is to be friendly to people, right? And so, but when you got negative groups sometimes, and the Democrats too, their plan and purpose is to be mean to people. It's so they can be the bully, so they can be the boss. And so that's the point, though, here is, it is every time, if I've run into black folks who are going to be violent to me, or white folks who are going to be violent to me, it's usually because they're Democrats. I mean, to sum it up, it's not just because they're in a gang. It's not because or whatever culture they're in. If you want to summarize it, they're Democrat and they don't believe in God. Don't you dare talk about God. Don't you dare talk about religion. And so they're going to be violent if you talk about God or religion. I mean, I'm sorry, politics or religion. Politics or God. Really, you talk about God and they're going to call that religion. All right, so they're going to be, if you talk at all about what's reasonable and you tell people not to steal, that stealing hurts people. If you teach people that stealing hurts people or whatever, they're usually pro-stealing. They're like, you're crazy if you think people can survive without stealing. They'll do that stuff. And there's a lot of that in certain circles, right, amongst the poor sides of town. So they'll say, so what they've done is they've had Democrats try to take over homeless venues, homeless shelters, and all this, and they try to chase God out, and they got the Christian shelters, and they got preachers that come in. I've seen shelters where Islamic folks schedule it so the preacher doesn't come in. No preachers come in. They complain about it and say you can't impose Bible on us, and they try to turn the Christian shelter into something else or whatever. Then they'll say you can't have Christianity here in this place kind of venue. You can't have people preach. You can't make people listen to a sermon before you feed them. You should just, from your heart, you should just want to feed them and all this. And then so they'll chase out the Christianity, and then they won't just leave it blank. They might insert Islam or something, or gay rights groups, gay pride or whatever. So I guess I heard Charlie Kirk make a relevant point, is that we should just have American pride and all be unified. Maybe an American Pride Month in July, which July 4th, for the whole month, have American Pride. But me personally, I go a little deeper than that as far as words go, because the Bible says pride is a sin. So I wouldn't call it pride, but you could have a whole month of American patriotism, understanding American patriotism, patriotic month. How about that? So, but I wouldn't want to use the word pride, frankly. So that's something I might push. I just thought of that. Patriotic month. So, so even if it's gay pride or straight pride, I don't like the word pride for either one. So when it comes to gay, I don't think it really fits to have a gay pride. Psychologically, I think your sexual inclination is just, everybody has to battle with, okay, am I choosing the right people to hang out with? I'm not talking about gay people. I'm talking about in general. Am I choosing a person who is friendly to hang out with versus whether they have gay inclinations or not? You want to hang out with somebody who's friendly and you're not thinking about their sexual preferences. And so if somebody has a sexual preference of being gay or they're straight, bottom line, from a true spiritual standpoint, we're all supposed to work on controlling our sexual desires, right? So we're all supposed to try to be celibate if you're not married. But the fact is, there is a reality, though, that same-sex marriage is not real marriage. That's reality. And that's not the way God created it. And so if somebody has that inclination, it's not a sin to have the inclination. I didn't mean to get off on this subject, but it needs to be addressed in a more honest way. Whether you think my way is intellectual or not, you could tell it's an honest assessment of ethics, and basically ethics and morality, right? So it's an honest assessment, and it's not a hateful assessment. Somebody might lie and say it's hateful because that's what they do. They silence people, and then they want to call for violence if you do an honest assessment like this. And there's very few people that can do one as honest as me, but I've exercised it for years and years. So, I mean, people just don't think of this stuff. They think of, okay, what's my schedule today? I got to get this done. I got to work all day, 8 hours, most of them 8 to 10 hours or whatever. And and then they're thinking about how they got to do their budget. I can't do that. I can't eat this extra bit of food because that's over my budget. I want that snack, but I can't do it. I got to get to bed. I got to take care of, go shop here real quick before the day's over with, because my shoes are wore out. That's what people think about the most. Those kind of things, that or scheduling a vacation. So it's but so they can't just bring this up, but they can hear it and say, yeah, that's true, that's right, that makes sense. So you forgive people and all this, but I'll say in general, if there's black folks who don't treat me right, they're usually Democrat. Usually, almost always Democrat. It does actually come down to Democrat, Republican, Independent. The Independent might treat me okay, though. A Democrat won't. I've had Democrats who act like they're going to be nice and want to dig into my mind and learn something, and that was kind of like a trap. They were faking it the whole time, and all of a sudden they hate me because they wanted to hear what I believe, and they acted like, oh, that makes sense. And then at the end, they were lying. They didn't think it. It didn't make sense to them. And then they hate me, and some of them just would never speak to me again. I'd see them in public, and I'd be like, hey, how you doing? And they would look down, wouldn't even talk to me. That's Democrat. So I've had black Democrats do it. I've had white Democrats do it. And so independents have not been as mean, but sometimes an independent leans Democrat. And but they'll still at least reconsider something or be considerate at times. But and then a Republican, it's not always the case that they're nice to me because because they've bought the lies of the Democrat Party demonizing drugs, and I talk about the subject of drugs a lot. So Republicans don't believe, a lot of them don't agree with me on the drugs stuff. They fall for the Democrat thing of don't talk religion or politics. If I'm going to talk about medicinal science, we'll call it medicinal science and proper laws. And the fact that they have done psychological warfare on people. And so you have some, and they're libertarian leaning, not as much just straight Republican, because Republicans did create the welfare system. So it does come down to what people's beliefs are and how they treat people and how it affects. So there's really mean, rude people. And when the Democrats, some of them are like, I don't hurt people or whatever, but they'll still tell you, they'll tell it that. They're like, hey, that's a killer. Let's have that killer hurt somebody. They'll do that, and they promote a killer hurting somebody, right? Or a bully hurting somebody. They'll put a hit on you. So they're like, I've never hurt anybody before, but they'll have somebody else. They'll put a hit on you for somebody else to do it. So that's Democrats. Republicans don't do that, generally. I'm sure there's some, but they'll do that. And so usually it's Democrats who have mobs who say somebody was at the scene of a crime. There's more than one person at the scene of the crime, but this one person walked. The police let him walk. Why did they let him walk? And they'll go putting a hit on that person, assuming they're guilty of. I know they're guilty. I know they're guilty of something, and they put a hit on them, and the real story never comes out. Maybe they don't want them to be a witness, so they'll go and take them out. You don't see that from the Republicans because they believe in one nation under God. They believe in having a proper trial, making sure somebody's guilty first. And if they are guilty, they believe in measurements of punishment based on the measurement of the crime, based on the veracity of the crime. If that's a word, I forget what that word means. But I know it's a word, but I forget. But based on the level of the crime. Like if you stole $5, they need to pay back the $5. If you stole $1,000, they need to pay back the $1,000. Is that the death penalty? Well, but the Democrats might want the death penalty for somebody. There's certain ones that would want it for the $5 just because they did it. If they stole my $5, okay, but then they're the ones that promote stealing. So they're hypocritical for one, but that's because they don't have any reason not to be a hypocrite. So they're purposely when you're a hypocrite, you're purposely hypocritical. It's not accidentally. Like accidentally hypocritical would be saying when you get married, you're not supposed to cheat on your wife. Okay, but you got married and you ended up cheating on your wife once or twice or whatever, which is a big deal. You do everything you can not to. Or you're watching TV and you're just seeing Beyonce dancing or whatever, and you glance back twice, right? So, no offense to Jay-Z, but he puts her out there. So anyway, but a man is going to notice a pretty woman, right? So, but I say not to lust. I would say not to lust, but I'm saying to keep battling that. I'm going to notice her sometimes, and I'll be like, okay, don't look too long or whatever. But if that's what they're showing, you might notice it, and you try to control your thinking. But I'm not married, first of all. So, but she is. So, I mean, I would, particularly because she's married, I wouldn't want to think, I wonder if we can be a match, but she's out there showing off her cute side or whatever, But she does it for money. I'm not trying to make this sound like a prostitution thing and all that, but she gets paid for doing that and making all women look lovely or whatever. That's the way they do their songs and everything, the lyrics and everything. It must involve all women as being as pretty as Beyonce. Everybody that listens to her thinks, hey, I'm just as pretty as Beyonce. Well, and I'm not saying you aren't, but anyhow, forget it. That's a confusing, they play games with that. The Democrats play games with it. But so a hypocrite is not somebody who notices somebody's pretty or who ended up cheating. That's called giving in. That's carnal Christian. That's giving in and falling. Sometimes it's you fell and you messed up. That's not hypocrisy. That doesn't mean you don't believe in God. It means you took your eyes off of God. A lot of times. So a hypocrite is somebody who promotes Beyonce and Madonna and they promote Playboy or they promote runway modeling. They're making money off of it. And then they go into politics and they say, call a man a pervert for thinking a woman's pretty. And when they're not bringing out these women's intellectual side. They're the ones promoting their looks, right? And so, and the thing about it is, when somebody brings attention to their intellectual side, they can have a physical beauty, but people aren't just focused on that because they're using their intellectual side and they're carrying themselves in a way that is modest and humble and trying to just be part of society. So, there is something that if somebody is bringing that out, there is some power to that. There's power to that because of just naturally. Anyway, I won't go into that stuff, but that's sexual psychology. All right. But it exists. There is a physical attraction. God created it. You can call it perverted to have any knowledge about that. But that's the hypocrisy that Democrats do on that. They actually are making all the money off of these models. They had a monopoly in media making money off of this stuff. And then they promote sexuality in media. They even hate the genders by doing sex changes. They make men look as beautiful as women, and they promote that, and they've made them look that way, and they want you to lust after these men that look like women because they're bringing out women's features, the beauty. There's certain features about women that are beautiful, and they want to paint a man to look that way. And they've done it, and they've had people looking at men thinking, man, she's pretty. Then they're like, that's a man? Okay. Then they turn around and they call a man a pervert for thinking a woman's pretty. That's hypocrisy and playing games and just controlling people and the psychological warfare. It's a lot of stuff to it. That's the Democrats that do that. Now, a lot of Republicans buy into those kind of tricks because we can't help. That's something that's not the same as saying, I'm not going to steal from anybody. I'm going to mind my business. I'm going to stay in my lane. I'm not going to hurt anybody. If we have disagreements, we're walking away. Republicans are good at that. They believe in that. And that's something you can pretty easily control because you just stay away from people, stay away from trouble. But something the human being can't control is easily on us. They can, but not 100% of the time, is breaking their diet or noticing something over there. And then say you see stuff and you want to call those people, that's sick. Those people are crazy. How dare them? And then you can you have to decide, okay, am I going to look at them and try to understand it, forgive it, and teach against that? Or am I going to sit there and hate on them, isolate them, and shame them, and which helps cause the problem of creating more of that, because people isolated, shamed, they're going to take revenge a lot of times. So people are into revenge and all this. So everybody, I can't just call everything a culture because everybody's an individual. People lose their temper at times. I've lost my temper before when I was outdoors and had to use the restroom. And I'm usually good at, if I've been in that situation, but I couldn't find a restroom. And then I finally found a private spot I could use it. And this car comes up and they're creeping by real slow. And I'm like, I think I flicked him a bird I showed him my muscles. I showed him my muscles because I'm like, what are y'all just standing there watching for? You think I'm, and I'm like, get out of here. For the one time I had the place I could find a spot to use the restroom, I had to go, man. And I thought, okay, they're picking on me. And so I've never done that before, but after that, I don't know who that was, but I think I did that to the wrong person. It was tinted windows and everything. I don't know who it was. I wasn't going to do anything, but they kind of got out of there. But I had people coming at me as if I'm threatening people all of a sudden. Like they want to get revenge. It could have been a woman driving, see? And I don't know who it was. But I had to use the bathroom. I mean, so people react, but I reacted wrong. I reacted wrong at that time, and that was unusual. But all of a sudden, I could have been killed that quick. Somebody could kill me over that, taking it as a threat. And it was. I thought they're threatening me, too. You know, the way they're pulling up and just going real slow. And I finally had this private spot. I could go to the restroom. They had tinted windows. I flexed my muscles. And I was really annoyed that there was no restroom close by. So, anyway, so everybody can most of the time I control those urges. And anybody can do that, and that's an individual thing. That's a temperament thing. That's your temper, controlling your temper, and those kind of things. That can happen with anybody. And so that has nothing to do with culture, but there are trends with certain cultures, amongst Democrats, particularly Democrat gangs. I've run into gangs who didn't mind listening to Republican sides of things. Now, there's people in religious culture who would say, how do you know a gang? You shouldn't know any gangs. Well, the Bible says, go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. So I make myself friendly to people who might be willing to listen. I've done that. And yes, I've been tempted, and I've been, when I've first learned in those cultures, and for many years, I've been falling for the sabotage and confused by it, but I don't understand the drug laws. So, but I had felt outnumbered, overwhelmed, and I've been tempted to do things just to get along with people, and because I like hanging out with some of them and getting to know some of the ladies and stuff. And I'm not a one night stand type of guy, but I like to get to know people. And but then sometimes people throw stuff at me, I have to leave, you know. So, but if throw stuff at, temptations that I'll say no to, right? But I haven't lived perfect. And you don't have to. No offense, but you don't have to live perfect to be accepted by God. But I've always tried to now. I'll say that. I'm not ever going out trying to. I hope to improve my understanding of things, which when you understand things better, then you're less tempted by certain things. Right? So I think I'm getting to a point like that, but there's really so many millions of lies out there. If you're going to be cross-culture, it's not that safe. But I'm not saying it's for everybody. I think it's just for me. I don't think I can be effective if I just isolate all the way, right? So I may, because I've isolated onto the good side of societies, and I don't see them walking in the Spirit. All right, guys, I got interrupted again. I can't ever get a conclusive thought, and I'm down to, I got 1 minute left that I can do here. And so, jeez, I lost my train of thought. Anyhow, my life is what it is. I have walked in the Spirit more than most people I've seen, and I don't mean to judge and compare, but I've just had so many people try to take me out of the spiritual mindset, out of the considerate mindset, out of the compassionate mindset. And I've had even people tell me, who taught me to be compassionate to folks, and then I end up being compassionate to people in the ghettos and stuff like that. And they're like, I'm like, the Bible told us to do. What church did you grow up in? I grew up in the same church as you, and it tells me to love my neighbors. And they're like, and be compassionate, and they're saying, not to them. And I'm like, I don't get that. I've exercised compassion, and I've been burned doing it, but at the same time, I didn't do wrong by doing that. And there's a lot I had to learn about how to communicate, and so I'm communicating, and the Democrats don't want anybody communicating, and a lot of them out there don't want you communicating. It doesn't mean that they don't have slaves that need some encouragement. So I still believe there's slaves out there. I know there's slaves, and you can't tell who's who a lot of times, who's a player, who's a slave. But I know I've been entrapped into some enslavement in a lot of ways. But I got to go. I can't end this. And so, like, when people steal from you, it takes a long time to recover. And nobody's considerate of that. You're just out. You've lost all your friends. You've lost everything. And you're worthless. And so if I put out good words, whether I'm worthless the rest of my life or not. Adios.